Thanks for being with us today. We're going to reflect on the experience that we've had in our journey to accreditation as Bloody Good Employers. So on a scale of 1 to 10, think about how comfortable you would feel about having conversations around periods at work and around your colleagues now.
I feel so much more confident having those conversations, and the levels of kind of empathy that we had from the guys in the room was really lovely. So I think from a scale of 1 to 10 perspective, I'm definitely up at like the 9s, 8s and 9s. What about you?
Yeah. Well, I got asked a similar question when we started this workshop, and I was already at a 9 because I luckily grew up in an environment at home where we could openly talk about this. So I was already up there in the high numbers, but talking about it with your colleagues is a whole other ball game. I had a really good feeling about it, and it was a very natural setting where our male colleagues joined in as well, and to me it did not feel awkward at all. So I'm still up there in the high 9s, I would say.
I think probably after going through the workshops it would be around an 8 or a 9. Mm-hmm. The only reason why I'm not 100% confident, I'd say, is there's people within our company that maybe haven't gone through the workshops yet because they're new. But I think that I would be comfortable, but perhaps they haven't gone through what we've been through, so they don't have that background knowledge.
So yeah, I think I started at like a 6 or a 7 in terms of how comfortable I felt talking about periods in the workplace. I've definitely gone up to a 10. The workshops did a really great job of creating a safe space, and I felt like we were all in it together, and there was no judgment from anyone at any point. No silly questions, no disagreements or anything around where we were going with it. So coming out of that, then I think we've all kind of learnt something, and we're all in a better place for it.
From how you thought or felt before the program to how you feel following the program and the workshops, do you think you've noticed a shift in both your comfort levels, stress or anxiety in our workplace, in how you talk about periods or maybe support your colleagues that bleed?
I guess I always distanced myself from it as a male colleague. Just it wasn't my business. I would always support someone who was going through period pain or their period. Now I feel a lot more confident to have those or to start those conversations if and when they need to be, and to be more informed around the type of support that my colleagues need during those times. So yeah, I would say an increase in comfort levels, and I guess in terms of stress and anxiety, also lowering of those, because I don't shy away from it now.
Yeah, and I think for me, in terms of like comfort levels, having the presence of people who don't bleed in the workshops and having those discussions around it, and not just being a workshop for people who bleed and a workshop for people who don't bleed, and kind of having that divide, it kind of broke that up a bit. And like made space for conversations to happen within our office. Making those subtle changes that we maybe have done from the first workshop to now, things like on Breathe HR, you can log your sickness as related to periods. I think that has also like decreased anxiety, because that's something that we're now recognizing is something that means people take time off work.
Totally. I think there's something around a common language as well, right? Like we all know the terms now, so we know like exactly what period pain is. We know that how debilitating and excruciating it can be, rather than it just being this mystical thing, right?
Yeah, so it's more like understandable to people who haven't gone through it.
Concrete.
I've noticed a difference in the workplace, not just for myself, but in general when we talk with each other, whether that's when we're seeing each other in the office or when we're on Teams. I have noticed myself saying to one of my colleagues when I was on a call, say, I'm sorry, like I'm just not fully focused today, I need to come on my period, where that just came naturally, where before I probably wouldn't have mentioned that was the cause. So I think that there is definitely more openness.
It's much more normalised to have those discussions now, and where you might have held back before because you thought you might be oversharing or talking about something that might make someone else uncomfortable. I think everyone's much more open and curious and actually wants to know, so that they can be as supportive as possible. I definitely think from a psychological safety perspective, I feel much more confident to share things that I perhaps wouldn't have done in the past.
And I also think the reaction to it, where if I would consider myself a couple of years ago, if one of my colleagues would have come to me and said, oh, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not feeling great, I'm coming on my period, I probably would have thought to myself, oh well, that's maybe a bit too much information. Whereas now, that's all right, fine, all good.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
From the workshops, what's the biggest learning that you've had?
I had probably a preconception that people might be more uncomfortable to talk about the subject, but I was so overwhelmed, and maybe that's indicative of our culture, but about the kind of support we had from all of the guys and a number of males that attended the session as well, and were genuinely curious to know what menstrual health meant, some of the myths, some of the truths, and how they could best support. So I was really, really overwhelmed by that, and I thought that was a lovely learning from my side. Don't go in with preconceptions around what people think.
I had two big learnings, and the first one was, and I feel a little bit ashamed of this, but the first one was that the realization that the environment in which I grew up, how comfortable and open we were about that was not a given. When I heard the stories of our colleagues, I was like, oh, okay, so this is not normal for everyone. So big lesson learned there. And the second one, a personal realization that I am very tough on myself, and that maybe I can be a bit kinder to myself, and that obviously extend that to others as well, where I'm like, we don't have to suck it all up, we don't have to pretend that we're fine every day. A bit more kindness.
One of the kind of key takeaways is that being a person who bleeds is really expensive in your lifetime, and kind of putting that into perspective of, I'm quite a privileged person, so in my lifetime I'm able to afford those kind of things and be comfortable in the times that I bleed throughout my lifetime, but there are millions of people around the world who don't have that luxury.
Yeah. For me, it's around the difference in it. So I guess I walked into the workshop thinking it was kind of one size fits all, that everyone who bled, their period was the same. Maybe a couple of days either side might be different, but they all had the same amount of pain and this, that, the other. So learning about kind of the different ways that periods show up for different people was really enlightening.